Okay. Is it warmed up? Okay. All right. Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee. I've been joined by the Honorable Councilmember Mitchell Englander. I don't believe we're expecting Councilmember Weezar. Okay. It's good to see our Director of Planning, Michael LeGrand, joining us. We have a full agenda with several cards on quite a few items. So let me see if I can run through some of the items that perhaps we can move on. Consent. On 2, we can adopt. Seeing no cards. 3, we could adopt and refer to the Planning Department, Cultural Heritage Commission. And that would be 2 and 3 with no cards. And those are the only 2. So if you agree, Councilor Englander, we can move on those 2? Okay. So that'll be the action of this committee on those 2 items. Mr. LeGrand, would you like to do your report now? Okay.
Mike LeGrand for the record. I have a brief report today. We had an excellent study session with the Planning Commission last week, walking them through the community plan program and the various aspects of what entails a community plan as we move forward with Ground Hills and Sylmar community plan. We're looking forward to having the Planning Commission as well review the San Pedro community plan coming before them soon. But this is kind of a brief overview we gave the Commission and to kind of educate them on some of the policies and objectives in the various council districts and the zoning tools we're utilizing in those areas. So it was a very positive meeting. One thing we're working on in the department I'd like to come back and talk to the Plum Committee about is really the number of people the department has touched this year in January alone. We've had over 1,000 people participate throughout planning department public hearings, whether it was items such as our community plan meeting we had in the West Adams area that drew over 300 people, or for example the LAX master plan that had over 500 people attend. The Wyvernwood project in Council District 14, for example, had hundreds of people also attend. So it just kind of goes to show you how the face of the department really is out working with the community, hearing their thoughts, being educated as well as educating the community on planning issues and items impacting their neighborhood and things they'd like to see changed. And we really are listening and in adopting, changing our recommendations based on a lot of the input we get and having a good conversation out there in all your districts. So we're happy to see just in the month of January alone over 1,000 people come to our public hearings and participate on items that impact their lives in the future as these projects move forward or these plans move forward. So I think it bodes well for the rest of 2013, the number of people we're able to engage in a city as large as Los Angeles. And that concludes my report, and I'll be available for any questions throughout the hearing.
Well, I appreciate your hard work. I don't want to open up a Pandora's box, but we look at neighborhood councils and their role in planning, and I've been to a couple of meetings where it became pretty clear that the technical issues that pertains to the planning process was not really up to speed, and you'll hear discussions that can get circular in nature because of the lack of information or understanding of process. And realizing just how many neighborhood councils are out there and what we don't have in terms of personnel. Has there been any thought as to addressing that particular gap?
Yes, we've actually been working with a group called Plan Check NC, Plan Check Neighborhood Council, who meets on a monthly basis. Also, Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils, to try and go to these kind of congresses of neighborhood council and meet with their land use committee chairs and discuss issues that are pertinent to their local areas. And so there actually is a very sophisticated kind of land use conversation going on in many of the neighborhood councils where we see that break down as when there's a turnover. And so periodically, about once a year, we like to do a training with the neighborhood councils. So we'll definitely be in 2013 2013 engaging in another land use training with a lot of the neighborhood councils, not only to explain kind of the rules that we operate under and the general plan and the findings we have to make, but also how they can be effective in participating in our process and understanding their legislative process that they go through, that it takes to get us a simple letter from them. Takes a lot of discussion, a number of meetings, so we want to be respectful of that and develop our policies to kind of work around that as much as we can. So we're going to continue that conversation throughout 2013 and look forward to doing some more trainings. But I'm happy to say that a lot of them do have a very sophisticated land use arm. Many of them call themselves a plum committee, modeled after your committee, and they engage us on a very sophisticated level, so I'm happy to see that.
Well, thank you for that. Again, we're trying to cover a lot of bases with shrinking resources, so the proactivity is much appreciated. Okay, so that does take us to item number 1. Roberto, I'd like to read that into the record.
Yes, council members. Item 1 is a motion, Alarcon Garcetti, instructing the planning department to consider the Tuna Canyon Detention Center in the list of historic cultural monuments.
Okay. This is the presentation from the staff on this.
Good afternoon, council members. Ken Bernstein with the Planning Department and Office of Historic Resources. This is an Alarcon Garcetti motion that would have the council initiate a new historic cultural monument application for the Tuna Canyon Detention Center. I know there are a number of community members here today from the Sunland Tujunga community and surrounding areas who want to speak on the issue. This is a significant site to the Japanese American community and to the legacy of Los Angeles related to the internment during World War II of Japanese Americans, and is a site that has been in other uses subsequent to World War II. The motion would ask the Cultural Heritage Commission to initiate the nomination, and if approved, we would work with the community and the council office to prepare the nomination, bring it back to the Cultural Heritage process and to the Plum Committee and Council.
Okay. So let's hear from the, any questions from the staff? Come on up, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to compliment you for all the work you have done thus far on all the other historical projects in the city of Los Angeles. I mean, you've done just an incredible job, certainly in our district as well. And I've had the pleasure of working with you for many years. And Ken, I don't think there's anybody in the city that truly represents us so well in protecting, preserving historic sites as you have done, and with that, I also respect the process and the history of where we're at as a city, and the issue that there is too many changes that don't reflect and maintain and protect the cultural heritage of the city, and we've got to be cognizant of that and cautious. But with that is a process as well. In reviewing this, and I know we'll hear more on this as well, has your office actually undertaken any studies on this particular site yet?
No, because the process has not begun. There is not a nomination that's been submitted to us. The nomination is being initiated by council motion in this case, so it does not formally get referred to our office and to the Cultural Heritage Commission until the council acts to initiate. So we have not begun a study. We did participate in some community discussions at the invitation of Council District 7, working with the Little Landers Historical Society, the Neighborhood Council, and others to discuss how the process would unfold. And to be candid, there are some challenges with this particular property because there are no remaining buildings from the historic detention center use during World War II. There are no remaining site features or buildings that are standing that are associated with that use. So we have asked the community to provide us with additional information as to the historic evolution of the site, and we will take all of that information and present it to the Cultural Heritage Commission.
And not being that familiar with the site, outside of what some of the information that was put forth today, which is actually a very interesting reading, and it's good history, have you actually worked with, differently from what we've done in our district, I know working with you in the past, whether it was the Munch Box and others that we worked on, that were very exciting. We started with working with the owner as well. Have you been working with the owner on this property as well? I'm not even sure who owns the property, but
I can't speak to what extent the community has. Again, because our office has not proactively initiated this or has not formally begun work on the nomination, we have not reached out to the owner. I believe that the owner is aware of the nomination that was initiated by Council District 7, and perhaps they and the community members could speak to that.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Let's hear from the public comments. Participants we have with us, Fred Gaines, come on up. Oh, 1 minute. I put 1 minute, but if you need to go a little bit over, we'll allow some flexibility.
I'm sorry.
We put 1 minute,
For 1 minute.
but if you need to go over, we'll allow some flexibility.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. Fred Gaines of the law firm of Gaines & Stacy on behalf of the property owner Snowball West Investments. I came down here a little angry, and now I'm even angrier. And let me tell you why. You have a process where you don't even notice the property owner. Okay? When the councilman put this motion in October, we found out about it by reading about it in the newspaper. This hearing I found out about because I'm a freak and I read the online plum agendas and saw the item on there yesterday and put a letter together and ran down here. So, and what makes me even angrier is to know that the staff's working with the community. The community knows all about this, and they don't even call the property owner. It's not even, your process doesn't even include sending notice to the property owner that their property is going to be up for discussion. It's outrageous that occurs. And it would save the staff the embarrassment of them getting up and giving a report like they just did and not even knowing what the other hand of the planning department's doing. This is the Verdugo Hills Golf Course. There has been since there's an EIR that was first put out in 2007, a draft EIR with a full section that analyzes with expert reports all of the historic analysis of this site, including with regard to the Japanese internment camp, and suggests mitigations and so forth. That EIR has already been out for comment. Comments come in, response to comments. The project was dormant for a little while. It's coming back, so we're going to recirculate these certain sections of the EIR. There's tons and tons of information about this that you don't even know about. Your staff doesn't report this to you when you get this this item in front of you. So
I need you to close.
No notice. This has already been fully reviewed. And by the way, what happens if you pass this? It goes to your staff. The staff will assign someone. They'll do an application. It'll go through a process. At the end of the day, if it was designated, that would mean that the property owner, in order to develop the property, would have to do an EIR. We're already doing the EIR. We already studied these issues. So you're being asked to direct the staff to go through this whole process where we're already at the end of the day. And you don't even know about it because this stuff isn't put on your agenda. And I have to go through the computer records to find out that this is...
Again, you should know, I called you first for a reason.
Right. And I appreciate it.
All right.
I did include it in the letter.
Okay.
We think this one motion is a waste of time. We ask for you to
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gaines. Nina Royale.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. My name is Nina Royal, and I'm a member of the Sunlatunga Neighborhood Council. I'm on the Land Use Committee, and also a member of Save the Golf Course for reference only. My actual name is Antonietta Di Nova. That golf course also detained Italians and Germans as well. And if people don't know this coming up, history has a history of repeating itself. And younger generations need to know things that happen. This was a travesty that should never have happened. But if there isn't something in our community, in our county, that states these things, people under us don't know growing up. So I'm supporting that you save this as a historical site. Please do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Lloyd Hitt, I believe. And I'm thinking it says Woodland, but I'm not sure.
It is right.
Okay.
By the way, the folder on your desk is something I submitted. I'm Lloyd Hitt. I'm with the Little Landers Historical Society, and we've been working on this actually, not this particular issue, but since 2006. This morning I'm here to well, I just told you that. I'm going to skip part of this because we're short of time. The site we're looking at is an important, intangible asset to Los Angeles. As you're right, there's nothing there. So how do we go about this? I've done 7 of these before, and this is the first one where I've just out there in thin air. And but I think if we look under natural heritage, it's defined as an inheritance of fauna, flora, geology, landscape, and landforms, and other resources such as water. And that's pretty much still there. The water is now in a concrete channel, but the mountains are there. The golf course driving ranges actually was leveled for the camp. The cultural heritage is a legacy of physical artifacts, and you're right, there are no artifacts. But the intangible attributes of a group or society is also included in that.
I have one question, though, sir. Yeah. In listening to the attorney who represents the owner, did anyone, whether yourself or others in your group, communicate with the owner about your intention?
No. Normally this is a grassroots thing, but it really came out of Alarcon's office.
Okay.
And so it was kind of a surprise to all of us, and he asked me to support it.
Okay.
And to do the history part of it. So it's much different than any I've
Okay, yeah, this is 12 years at this chair, and
yeah.
Okay, so it's interesting. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Next one. Karen Kehein Zimmerman, and I apologize if I mispronounced her name.
Actually, it's Karen Keene Zimmerman.
Oh, Keene, okay. I was trying to make that H. Okay, all right, go ahead.
Actually, I'd like to kind of pick up where Lloyd left off about the lack of a physical remains. And when I think about what happened there in 1941 through 1945, and I think about if a descendant of someone who was interred there was to come, the setting itself is basically what it was when the buildings were there. The golf course has been added, but the majestic oaks are still there, the hillsides are there. These physical concrete landscape items actually observed and witnessed this. And although it's very different than the traditional sort of landmark, I think that the spirit is still there. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mark Sturdivant.
Thank you, Councilman Reyes, members of the committee. I'm Mark Sturdivant, Chairman of the Board of Glendale Crescenta Voice. We're a nonprofit organization with more than 5,000 members, supporters, and donors who live in the Glendale, La Crescenta, Sunland, Tujunga region of Los Angeles. And I'm here on behalf of those members, all of whom urge you to support the motion to include the Tuna Canyon Detention Camp as a cultural and historic monument for the city. The historic value of this site is clear, even though, as others have mentioned, there are no artifacts remaining on the site, but we look for the opportunity to interpret the site, to place a monument there, to place information that will help members of this generation and future generations understand what took place at this camp. Over 1,400 Japanese Americans passed through this camp on their way to other facilities in the first few months of World War II. And at a time when our nation's reaction to immigrant populations is currently taking center stage, we think we should not forget what happened at Tuna Camp. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Cindy Cleghorn. That will be the last of our speakers on this card.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Cindy Cleghorn. I'm Vice President of Outreach for the San Antonio Neighborhood Council, and I also serve on the Land Use Committee. I'm here to present a letter from our President, Mark Siegel. The San Antonio Neighborhood Council asks that you support Councilman Alarcon's motion to prepare an application to designate the Verdugo Hills Golf Course site as a historic and cultural monument of the Tuna Detention Station site. This request reflects the wishes of our community at large. And I won't read the entire letter because you have a copy, but I'll read an excerpt. The historical value of this site is very important. As the value of other historical landmarks in our city have been honored, so should this site be honored. And thank you, and we request your support.
Thank you, Ms. Claiborne. Let's see. This is an interesting one. Is Councilman Alarcon's office here? Gerald, please go ahead. Mr. Gerald Gubitan.
Hi, good afternoon. Gerald Gubitan, Chief Planning Deputy with Councilman Alarcon's office. Upon redistricting, the council member district expanded into the San Antonio neighborhood, and upon learning about the historical significance of the site, the council member did introduce the motion following the process of the city process. There was at least one major community meeting on this topic, and clearly you can see some broad support for acknowledging the historical significance of the site. It's indisputable, I believe. Granted, there are no building or structures remaining on the site, but landscape features or whatever the process will bear out, and we will go through that process hopefully with your support in initiating the motion and sending it forward.
One of the awkward moments is when you hear the owner didn't know about this process. And can you speak to that in terms of how do we, in all fairness to property owners, not only here but throughout the city, how do we posture ourselves given that particular dynamic?
The councilman, again, introduced the motion following the process. I don't know if there's a requirement on behalf of the city family to notify the owner or solicit consent, and maybe Ken can speak to that question.
Okay.
The councilman did not instruct our office to necessarily connect with the owner. However, this is a public process, and in the community meeting, there was widespread notification, including all the stakeholders.
Mr. Bernstein, can we, just to understand the general parameters and how we conduct ourselves as a city, when do we connect with the owner in this process?
Let me explain. I think the reason that this is an awkward moment, as you say, is because the nomination has not yet the nomination process has not officially begun, and nothing has triggered the provisions of our cultural heritage ordinance yet because the council has not acted. We do have very specific notification requirements in the cultural heritage ordinance for the hearings of our commission to take a nomination under consideration, to act on a nomination. However, this is a council motion to trigger the beginning of that process, and the notification is the general Brown Act requirements, and the city attorney can correct me, for any committee hearing. I should point out we did have a meeting with Mr. Gaines and his client after the nomination was introduced, after the councilman held his community meeting last fall. Our office and I personally did sit down with Mr. Gaines and his client to explain how the process would play out and the considerations we would be looking at in evaluating a nomination and in putting a recommendation forward to the Cultural Heritage Commission. But because the nomination is not yet essentially in our hands, the notification for this hearing is as normally would occur by the city clerk for all committee hearings of the council. Does that?
Councilman Linder?
Yes. No, that does help. Actually, let's take a pause for one second on this. I think that the community they have a great point in all the documents they put together in the history of this site is very significant to LA, and I want to compliment the community for engaging. It doesn't sound like any of this came from any ill will at all. In fact, just from what I've heard today, you've got a council member who, under redistricting, took part of a new district, heard from the community, acted on that right away. Often, too often, we're subject to suggesting that we act too slowly. And here's somebody who wanted to jump on a piece of history to protect and preserve it. So my hat goes off to CD7 for doing that. I can also understand in some instances where you want to put something in very quickly and even stealth-like, not whether it's on purpose or not, but in certain cases we've got developers out there, property owners, who if they have an intent to build something later, we've had a history in the city where the second that we act on trying to protect it, they go in the dark of night and tear down the facilities. We've had that situation happen downtown with other developers, and that's just criminal, or should be anyway. And so, but here's a case where there aren't any structures. And so it sounds to me that this was just a little too premature, but it was with good intention. And it sounds that there perhaps are other pending plans that perhaps the council office might not have had the full history from the property owner's perspective on, having just taken over that area. And although my hat goes off to CD7 for working so closely with the community and actually jumping on something so quickly, I think it's time to pause on this. It sounds like it's a little unique because there aren't structures on it and there isn't really an active pending development project before us either. So it sounds like it's got some time to work with the community, which is what I would suggest, and the property owner, and figure that out and come back in a good space. It would be therefore my recommendation to receive and file this at this time, only because of threat of any possible litigation by the attorney, by the law firm that's stated here in the letter, and revisit this when it can come back as a package, working with the community, putting together perhaps a roundtable discussion with CD7 and the community and the owner, and figuring out what would be best, getting the neighborhood council involved perhaps to take an active position and role as well, and what would be best and what everybody comes up with as a comprehensive plan.
Well, let me ask this question in light of what you just said. When we have the directive, and just to explain how we could look at the issues raised by Councilman Englander, when we say to adopt and refer to the Planning Department Cultural Heritage Commission, the word adopt, are we saying that it will become a historic monument? What are we saying?
Terry Kaufman, Mesilla City Attorney's Office. All that's happening today, or all that's in front of you today, is an instruction to prepare an application. That is what triggers the start of the process. There will be a fully noticed hearing at Cultural Heritage Commission where staff presents the application, and people who support the nomination go and speak and frequently present evidence on one side, and if the property owner or others disagree with that, they present evidence on the other side that says it doesn't meet the criteria for a monument under the administrative code. It's 22171 at SEC. It's been a while since I cited that, but so today is really not. Today is, I mean, people can come and say support the nomination, but all you're doing right now is saying we want the application so that it can be investigated by staff.
So we're triggering the process that could fold in what Councilman Englander is suggesting.
Yes, I mean, because that process takes place at the first stage at the Cultural Heritage level, and then Cultural Heritage Commission, they're just a recommending body. Gotcha. So then they recommend up or down. They could tweak the application a little bit depending on circumstances. Then it comes back to you to act on the actual monument if the commission says, yes, we recommend that this property be a monument.
Okay. So, Councilman, I believe, given that this is the starting point for that level of discourse that you're seeking, that perhaps we can allow them to move forward in the application, knowing that there's still another pivotal point that will decide whether it becomes what they're seeking or not.
With all due respect on that, I agree with that this would launch that process. I think launching the process, I've got concern over sort of the way the motion is written. On the further move, it says that after reviewing the application, The motion goes on to instruct Cultural Heritage Commission to submit a report to the full City Council regarding the inclusion of it says here, Tuna Canyon Detention Station site, the city's list of historical cultural monuments. So it doesn't say to begin that process, to go through the approval process. It's sort of a de facto pre-approval, if you will, although not legally binding. I get that.
If I could suggest, under
That's a concern.
the Cultural Heritage Ordinance, the way this should be crafted is the ordinance allows for the council to initiate an application. Most of the applications, nominations that we get are from outside parties. The commission takes it under consideration, votes on a recommendation, then it comes back to Plum and council. But the ordinance allows the council itself to initiate, and I think that is really the rubric
I understand
that we're operating on
My
here.
point was this, that, and perhaps we can ask the attorney here who's representing the owner for their consideration on this.
Mr. Gaines,
Mr. Gaines, was it? If we could, on the, because my concern is on the motion, if that's okay to begin the process, I'm okay with that, but if it sounds like it's a potential litigation, it says here, it doesn't say to initiate the process or consider it or begin the process. It actually says after reviewing the application, take the application to council and approve it.
Councilman, if you look at the first moving clause, you will see that it indicates to initiate the process.
Right, but there are two. So then it says
Right.
once it's initiated,
Right.
put on the. So
And I think
if I could get the applicant's representative to speak to that, if it sounds like it's only the beginning of a process that you would be included from now on, or what would your position be based on the discussion that's taken place?
Well, first of all, we were concerned with the language because it did make it sound like it was a fait accompli. But more importantly, we already have a detailed analysis, including all the information paid for by the applicant, in terms of a historic analysis that goes through the detention center, goes back to the 1850s on this site, and it's in an EIR, and it includes mitigations, which is exactly what was asked for, that the site be recognized, that there be plaques, that there be information, that there be one part of the property where you can view the trees as they were back in those days, because the rest of the property has been graded into a golf course for 50 years, and there's nothing there. So the end point that you're going to initiate staff's going to assign someone, they're going to go out and do an application, we're going to have a couple of hearings before other commissions, go back to Plum, back to the council, to get to a point where the requirement would be that we do an EIR that we've already done. That's going to have a mitigation in it. That's the point about this application. That's exactly what will happen. We'll have at least 3 or 4 more public hearings, the whole process to get to where we already are.
And taking in light into where we're at with staffing requirements and where we're at and the totality of those issues and concern of where we're at with the city and the cutbacks that we've made and where this is at today, I would stick with that recommendation for them. But I would ask that you work together, put together a working group, ensure that you include the community and the folks that have been deeply involved in this, and bring that back together with looking at and sharing. Would you be willing to share your documents and information and history of the site with the council office and the community?
They're all public documents. It's in a published EIR. So yes, and we would
make them
very much
available
like the opportunity to sit down with whoever wants to sit down and go through how would we
So another point of view,
commemorate the site. That
Mr.
is going
Gaines,
to be a
Mr.
mitigation.
Gaines, another point of view would be, if this EIR that you speak of is already done, what we're doing is essentially classifying it or categorizing it as a historical monument based on the findings of the EIR. If they're going to be consistent with what the commission would have concluded anyway, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yes, and you know what I'm thinking while I'm sitting here? Maybe we'll stipulate to it. Maybe we'll just, if we come to an agreement that here's what it is. So give the opportunity for there to be a conversation before you go off and send us into a process where your staff's going to work, where we're going to have at least 3 more public hearings just on this separate issue. It's unnecessary.
Okay, I'm going to move in a direction where I will respectfully just agree to disagree with my colleague, and I would move to adopt and refer to the Planning Department and Cultural Heritage Commission this body of work. Madam Attorney?
Terry Kaufman, Mesilla City Attorney's Office. It still has to be, this motion still has to be voted on by full council.
Right. So it'll go before the council. With no recommendation, let me ask Mr. Gubitan, representing the council. What is the desire of your office? I want to understand your priority.
The council member introduced the motion and would like the process to move forward. What I'm hearing is simply an initiation of an application. There will be a deliberative process before the Cultural Heritage Commission, a weighing of the evidence. The outcome may or may not be designation. It may certainly be no designation, right, if the evidence does not bear out. So we would like to encourage moving forward with the process as initiated by the motion. That would be the councilman's preference.
Okay. Councilman Glender?
I'd be happy to amend my request and that we move this then on to council with no recommendation from the committee, but that would allow then time for you to meet with the owner as well as the community and come back and have the conversation with council that in fact you have gotten together and decided what in fact is moving forward, since it doesn't appear that that conversation has yet taken place.
Well, I appreciate the spirit by which you put forth your recommendation. I'll continue to support what the council wants to do, and it'll just be a one-on-one. How would this move forward?
Well, in essence, if it's 1-on-1, it goes without recommendation.
So that we're there.
Yeah, by default.
Okay, we're fine.
And there's also a typo in the motion. It should be corrected. I think it directed Cultural Affairs Department. It should be the Planning Department.
Okay.
The text of the motion, it said Cultural Affairs Department. So that's a typo. I think they meant the Cultural Heritage Commission.
Cultural Heritage,
Yeah.
okay. So it continues with no recommendation.
And it goes to the council.
It goes to the council.
Fixing the process so that owners get notice.
And I'm glad you look at our website. Thank you. Okay. Madam Clerk, do we have a date?
No, Mr. Chair, there is no date yet. However, probably within the next 2 weeks of this meeting. However, if anyone who is interested in tracking this this matter, as in when it will be scheduled or if any new updates occur for this this subject, you can subscribe to the Council File Management System under this Council File 12-1625 and have email alerts sent to you. So then that way, if when a council date has been determined and when the draft committee report is available online, you can be notified and you can view it online.
Okay, thank you. Next item?
The next item, council members, is a motion by Mr. Englander and Krikorian. It's instructing various city departments to streamline the oversight of land use planning and administration in the city.
Okay. Okay. Sounds item 2?
It was for a motion by Mr. Englander to streamline land use planning in the city.
Words on that, and Mr. Englander would like to speak to the motion or have staff come on up?
What I was going to ask is if we can actually continue the item for a couple weeks. I've talked to the various departments. They're going to be coming back with written reports from those affected departments, and if we can continue it for a couple weeks. So I don't know if you want to hold public comment for that or leave it up to the speakers. But
we do have one card. Mr. Barry Johnson, would like to speak?
Thank you. Barry Johnson, Studio City stakeholder. Good afternoon. I'm here on behalf of Studio City's Lisa Sarkin today, who has an injured knee but is listening at home. And she was just curious whatever happened to 12-2. This motion just seemed to appear, and we've never heard what happened to 12-2. And then personally speaking for myself, I was just curious that whatever happens and wherever this motion goes, that adequate time still be allowed for overview by neighborhood councils, that we wouldn't get so streamlined that we wouldn't have enough time for neighborhood council review. Thank you.
And I appreciate your concern, and I do know we have Mr. Overham here and Mr. LeGrand, and I think within the context of the bigger picture and looking at the Economic Development Department that's being contemplated, looking at how to become more business friendly, that these are elements that add to our ability to become efficient. So I appreciate Councilman Englander's motion in that it is getting to many of the pivotal points of how we begin those building blocks towards a more efficient city, beginning with this kind of work that lays out our work program, where we overlap, where we cut out what some might call the lard factor and delays. And I think it's within that spirit that we take this motion. But if Mr. Overham or Mr. Glenn like to speak to this, it's yes.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and your comments as well. This has come after a lot of discussions on various options and looking at 12 to 2, for example. 12 to 2, which was talked about for quite some time, was put to bed by one of the deputy mayors, Austin Butner, I believe, when he started working on it and taking over, trying to create and streamline the processes and the efficiencies and working with different applicants, and as well as a blessing from the mayor that people, number one, don't believe it'd be 12 to 2, but more importantly, it's not oftentimes 12, sometimes it's 21, and 2 is still too many. Why not 1? Or why not have a point person? Or why not have application tracking numbers with dispositions? And so looking at those and creating efficiencies to streamline and get the departments to work together, not just on the day-to-day functions for creating those efficiencies as applications come through and projects are being planned and developed and built, but also looking at long-term vision plans and getting departments on the same page, because it's building and safety and transportation and energy and the environment and planning department that oftentimes work on different tracks in terms of their long-term strategic initiatives and trying to get them under on a single page to work together and create that, as well as sort of where we're going with this. And it's going to be incredibly comprehensive, and this comes out of a lot of those discussions and opportunities, but also part of the last budget deliberation process. Those plans are actually, we've got preliminary plans on paper now, and they're fine-tuning them to create suggested organizational charts and flow plans, and those will be coming. That's what I'm asked to come back in a couple of weeks. So, thank you.
I think, again, from the big picture point of view, given today's hearing on the Economic Development Committee and proposing this new department, how we isolate the role of the council, the role of the mayor's office and the respective committees, and the collapsing of functions and departments to be more efficient are going to be critical tasks that will be before, I believe, the council in ensuring accountability and also real performance and making a difference. So I look forward to that conversation as we continue down this road. But again, I open up the floor of either Mr. LeGrand or Mr. Overham would like to come on up. If you don't have to, if you want to, come on up.
Just a quick point of clarification. So rather than referring the motion to staff, you're going to hold the motion but ask us to report back in writing within a few weeks, correct? Okay. That's fine. And just for the neighborhood council member who spoke, anytime we do a process, ensuring the dialogue with the public, our doors are always open, and we do attend plan check-in, see all these other, anytime we have an organizational change or a policy change, we always do bring it before these congresses and neighborhood council to get your input. But I can guarantee you the intent of the motion has nothing to do with circumventing any of the public outreach or process. If anything, it'll look at ways to enhance the working relationship we have with the neighborhood councils. Thank you.
Mr. Overham?
Bud Overham, General Manager of Building and Safety, and I guess I was just going to ask the same clarification that Mr. LeGrand just asked, is that the motion was to direct staff to do a report back in 30 days. The motion now is to table the motion to direct staff to do the reports. Okay, so you adopted the motion.
Adopt the motion, have a 30-day report back. Okay, there'll be action in this committee. Items 5 and 6, if we can take those together because we have Mr. Johnson on both. The staff can come up and brief us on 5 and 6 for the record. And Roberto, you want to read those into the record?
Okay, so item 5 and 6 are city attorney prepare ordinances. Item 5 has to do with the transfer of residential density in mixed-use developments. And item 6 has to do with redefining eligible zones when you combine residential and commercial uses.
Okay, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. My name is Nicolas Zúñiga. I work for the Department of Planning.
Welcome, sir. And this is your first time before the committee?
Yes.
It's okay. Just talk slowly and take a deep breath. You're all right.
Okay. So basically what the ordinance is coming back to Plum, it already came 2 years ago in September 2010. And it's just coming back from the city attorney's office. It basically is conditional use permit for FAR averaging transfer. So it allows to large developments, large unified developments, to transfer FAR from one parcel to another in commercial and manufacturing uses. So the new ordinance, the proposed ordinance, is inconsistent with this ordinance, but it will basically allow to also transfer residential density between parcels.
Okay. So it's making the commercial and residential consistent in the process, in the transference of these FARs.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's item 5. And item 6?
Item 6, it's a mixed-use exemption, and it basically, this is very simple. It's just taking out some outdated words and phrasing, referring to the 2 redevelopment project areas that are already expired. So we're taking out those words, those redevelopment planning areas in downtown. So, but the rest is consistent, and it basically allows. It's encouraging mixed use in these redevelopment areas. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any questions?
Quick question.
Please.
Thank you very much. You did a great job.
Thank you.
It was the only thing that I would mention here under 6 was the minimal impacts, in as much as there are a few R5 zone lots. And so this would pertain essentially to R5s. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And my only question then is, where are they and how many are there? Do we have a map of them, or are there?
Well, I'm going to let Tom Rothman to answer this.
That's my only question.
Your question is, where are the R5 zones? We do have a map. I could provide it to you later on. R5s are in downtown, and there's some R5 in Westwood, and that's about it in the city.
That's about it? Okay. And the council members in those particular areas?
In Wilshire and Westwood.
And the council members of those particular areas, have they taken positions on?
No, this went through the City Planning Commission and Plum about 2 years ago. There
was no opposition?
No, none at all. I mean, this is really just clarifying existing rules.
Just checking. Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, on 5 and 6?
Barry Johnson, Studio City stakeholder. We've just been concerned in the East Valley that mixed use has by and large failed. We have like a 14-story building in NoHo that's barely occupied, and we were told that in many cases 10% of the units were going to be for low income, and as it turns out they're not. They're being rented or leased at higher rates, and we're just concerned that the entire reason for building these to help people on low incomes is not being achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I believe we have one
Tanner Blackman from Council District 14.
Representing 14.
I would just like to add to Councilmember Englander's question in terms of the where, that this was really addresses a particular issue with downtown, with the expiring redevelopment project areas in downtown, and a specific exception in those CRA project areas that will be continued in the central city community plan area. So it's really a sort of downtown ordinance, and my boss is all for it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. All right. So, go ahead.
So you will be approving the city attorney ordinances?
Yes.
You could take one at a time, Council.
So, okay. So on 5, we'll approve the city attorney prepared ordinance. And my colleague had to step out for a second, but he is supportive. And 6, as well, we'll approve the city attorney prepared ordinance. So we're moving 5 and 6 in approval. That'll be the action of this committee. Okay, number 7.
Number 7, council members, is a city planning commission recommended new specific plan. It's called the Cornfield Arroyo Cycle Specific Plan.
And I think this requires a drum roll?
Yes, it's in, I think it's
okay.
in District 1.
Okay. All right. You'd like the staff come on up? And as they come on up, I do want to thank the city planning department, Claire and her team, as well as Jill Soriel from my office, along with the planning staff. This is, I don't mean to steal all your thunder, Claire, but let me just say a couple of things. One is, thank you for your hard work and the staff. 2 is, Councilman Englander, this is one of those processes that is, it took 5 years. When in reality, it was 3 years. If it wasn't for the state officials who shut down our CRAs and took our resources, pushed us into a place where we had to fight another 2 years, given the debacle that their decisions basically created a lot of complexities for us, and it extended it 2 more years. But that being said, this is a proactive approach in engaging the environmental impact report process, where we're covering close to it's over 630 acres of land, probably close to 650. And within that acreage, we are redefining the space so that we can promote predictability amongst property owners and investors, and how we restructure the built-out environment so that we can break out of this frozen state that was essentially fairly punitive to the area, because we were stuck post-World War II zoning patterns that was reliant on railroad, industry, transportation modes that are clearly outdated. This pushes us into the next century with the rail stations as anchors, 36-acre park as another major feature that we build around, with the river master plan in place. And to me, it's a way to create revenue for the city, because now we're making it more inviting for us to address the concerns of livability, economic development, and ecosystems. But Claire will give you the breakdown of what this truly means, but I just wanted to give you a sense of urgency that we had in making sure we are able to create this kind of opportunity for the city. Claire.
Thank you, Councilman. Claire Bowen, City Planning. As Councilman Reyes just outlined, this plan really does follow on the heels of the improvement of the Los Angeles River Revitalization Master Plan 5 years ago, and this area was identified as one of the key opportunity areas. As he also mentioned, it's a real opportunity for the city to, with the establishment of this plan, to really encourage the stimulation of economic development in this area. It does take an area that today is largely zoned industrial. It also includes a lot of city-owned properties where we largely have kind of manufacturing and maintenance yards in there. It's an opportunity to leverage those developments, given the fact that you have 3 transit stations in this area. You have the new Los Angeles State Historic Park that's being developed. You have the river improvements. You also have a lot of adjacent communities with the Chinatown community and the Glassell Park and the Cypress Park communities just immediately surrounding this area. So it's an opportunity to really kind of knit those communities together through the revitalization of this area. how we're doing it is also fairly unique. We're using a lot of innovative strategies to help achieve the broad vision of seeing this area transformed from its fairly low density, low performing industrial area to an area that would now in the future include a robust mix of uses that would include not only the jobs, because we think the jobs are a critical part of this plan to retain this area largely for jobs, but also then given the kind of future amenities that are planned for this area, again with the transit and the park and the river, that it's also an area well suited for some percentage of residential as well as commercial uses, things that help support kind of a 24/7 livable community. We also are including strategies that will ensure as the development occurs that buildings are built in a way that really strengthen the urban form, so that you really create an environment that goes from what is today very wide boulevards with no trees, really no engagement with the public realm, to an area that is really very inviting for pedestrians and bicyclists. And so really that helps then support the transportation investment that's been made in this area, because it really does encourage people to be, like I said, walking and taking transit. And hopefully this becomes a place where people are not needing to use their car as much. And so that speaks very much to one of the key innovations in this plan, which is actually to do away with parking requirements altogether in this plan area, so that developers, I know I see the eyebrows going up, but Councilman Englander, the intention here is to really let the market set no parking requirements. So we imagine in the beginning developers might include kind of parking the amount of parking you might see on a traditional project. Again, this is an area obviously in transition. There is an amazing amount of parking already in this area. There are just seas of parking lots. So there's lots of parking already available in the area. And so we imagine that, again, it's that over time projects will start to reduce the amount of parking they have in their projects. So that's really a key innovation. But one of the other key innovations in this area is, because we do want to make this an area where developers are encouraged to come and build, is that we have basically through the environmental process cleared all of the projects that you might see in the future, as long as they are following kind of the rules of the plan. So again, everything's kind of environmentally clear, and so it really speaks to kind of the streamlining that we were talking about a little bit earlier, and that we really want to make this an area that is attractive for developers. They're not coming in and having to face a lengthy environmental and approval process. They will have to come in through an administrative clearance, where our department and building and safety will be looking to make sure that the developer is following, again, all the rules, whether it's the design standards to make sure the building design conforms to the standards of the plan, as well as the kind of uses that are allowed, as well as the amount of floor area ratio that they would have. But if they conform to all those things, again, they are then just approved kind of by right and move very quickly into the building, building and safety for their building permit. And that's a real key innovation. We've also created some innovations in terms of encouraging this area for affordable housing, because the area today has William Mead in it, and which obviously includes all affordable housing. There's also been some new affordable housing built in the area near the transit station, and given some of the surrounding communities, there was a lot of interest in making sure that as this area redevelops and potentially, gentrifies, which is obviously a concern of the community, that you ensure that a percentage of development as it incurs is allowed for affordable housing. So we have some unique procedures that will encourage that inclusion of affordable housing without being a requirement. Actually, we've got up here, if you want, I can walk through, actually, if Ken will brief me through it. We basically are creating new zoning districts. So instead of having kind of your typical segregated zoning where you have residential, commercial, and industrial, we're basically blending these together into 3 mixed-use zones. We'll have an urban innovation, an urban center, and an urban village. And they all allow a mix of uses, but how they vary depends on kind of the range and the mix of uses. The urban center is intended as a more intensive amount of development. It's located right near the transit stations, and is really an area where we imagine we'll see a fair amount of commercial, as well as some light industrial perhaps, and some residential. It would be, again, most intensive in terms of height is allowed there. The urban village is where we are allowing, assuming most of the, which is the next slide, allowing mostly residential. We're imagining would be coming in this area where you would have your commercial ground floor and active retail, and then the urban innovation is primarily established where we would really want to retain it for the light industrial jobs that are there today. But again, it would still allow for a little bit of residential and some commercial. Maybe just in closing, the area today is all largely zoned 1.5 FAR, and the intention here is to raise that FAR to 3, with the exception of residential projects. And then, but in areas where, especially closer to the station or near the state park, we want to encourage the increase of the FAR above even the 3 FAR. And so we have a variety of strategies where developers could go from the 3 to a 4 to 5 or 6, depending on where they're located. It gets a little complicated, and I won't necessarily walk through all those details, unless you have questions.
I think a picture tells 1,000 words, right?
Yes.
One, again, thank you for this. Any questions from my colleague or any comments? We do have a
very quick comment, because I think a lot of work has already gone into this. Yeah, you got my eyebrows up. A livable streets dream. This is very fascinating, and something that I want to compliment the chairman as well. Never ceases to amaze me with his vision and leadership in this city, and particularly as we look for the future and what we want to do as examples and sample projects. Just compliment everybody. It sounds like this has been a long time in the making to move to get to this point. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman Englander. And we'll have public comment, but as the public comment folks come on up, I want to thank them for their patience. And I think, Claire, about how many, and can I ask Joe Sodell to join you? Joe, can you join Claire at the mic? When it comes to number of meetings, can you give me some ballpark figures of how many meetings this might have taken?
Well, it's in the dozens of meetings. It was certainly much more intensive, obviously, in the early years. Lately, in the last couple of years, it hasn't been as many as we've been moving it forward. But I would say dozens of meetings. You know, large meetings,
Did we
big
pass
workshops.
the 100 mark? Did you pass the 100 mark? 100 meetings?
I wouldn't say it's hundreds, probably hundreds of people involved with, I would say, dozens of
Close to 100? I just want to get... See,
probably
the reason
close
why,
to, probably close to 50.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking is that the essence of the effort was to get the vision from the stakeholders, from the property owners, to define themselves. And that the EIR defines how stakeholders want to see themselves in the future. And I think the meetings allowed you, the technicians, the professionals, to provide a toolbox that they can pick from to define the new landscape for the next 50 years. So in essence, we are able to essentially address those who would jump out of the legal bushes and want to sue or go after an individual parcel if it didn't fit. Here, a whole region, if you will, that includes over 600 acres is now compatible because it's fitting within the infrastructure of the rail stations. And I think that's what's the beauty of this process that you, as stewards, conducted through the years. And for that, I'm hoping we could use this as a boilerplate to look at other areas in the city to promote jobs, to promote efficiencies, and to promote livable standards that are acceptable to the people that live there and the property owners who invest there. Anything else you'd like to add, Jill?
Thank you, Jill Soriel. I would just add that the types of meetings we had really ranged from the legal requirements we had for scoping meetings for the EIR to very much just community level design charrettes. We had some of them facilitated in the early stages by the Western Justice Center. We went to local schools. We talked with kids. We talked with parents. So I think the range of meetings and the kind of feedback we got spoke to the process of trying to get feedback on a vision for the area.
What makes this different from other specific plans? Why is this so unique?
The process or the plan itself? I mean, the plan itself, I think one of the key things that makes it unique is that the community and the developers have a clear roadmap going forward of what is going to be developed and have a kind of an assurance that as development occurs, again, that the form is going to be built in a way that really strengthens and makes the community a safer and more pleasant place to be, and it makes developers confident that the process will move smoothly.
But isn't the administrative clearances in the EIR itself take it to another level?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you just speak to that? What does that mean?
Well, I mean, I think it means like what I was just describing is that through the environmental process, we basically have made it so that a development project, again, as long as it follows all the standards that are identified in the plan, they are going through an administrative clearance process. It's typically a specific plan requires a project permit compliance, which then sets up a fairly lengthy, review process, and there's also then an appeal and entitlement process. Those processes, to some degree, still exist. Obviously, if a project wants to waiver from the plan and they want to make changes, then they would kick themselves into a lengthier process. We still want to make sure that there's opportunity, if there are changes for the community, to have input.
This is a question from Councilman.
We've got a serious concern over what you just brought up because we're not adopting this process to all other projects. So how do we bottle this and capture it and ensure that we are able to do this citywide in other projects? Why is it always CD1 gets its fair share? No, I'm kidding.
It sounds familiar.
We actually...
That goes back 20 years.
We embarked on a public process similar to, but altogether different from what you're doing here today, if you will, which has been the vision of Northridge and bringing the stakeholders and the community together, as well as CSUN and the neighborhood councils, 4 neighborhood councils, in fact, over time that have come up, hiring a consultant to do something similar to this. But you've taken it in a whole different direction and level with internally doing it in the city for having these sort of blanket approvals as long as they follow what everybody has agreed to. And it gives that clear opportunity for investment because that's the one thing we hear from developers is the lack of certainty and the delays and the continuous obstacles that emerge. And you've sort of gotten rid of all that. So where have you been all my life? No, this is great. So
okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Can you answer the question, though?
We can certainly, do it in other locations. I mean, it's really a decision of the council to decide to spend, kind of the resources and identify what would be, the right, place to do it. I think it's worth allowing a little bit of time to go by to ensure that this is happening, basically to kind of see it in action and kind of see really where the bugs are and make sure it's really working smoothly. But I think I would like to see it hopefully replicated in other places over time.
My hope is that the Economic Development Department that's being contemplated can look at this approach as a boilerplate in how we bring out levels of criteria that's so specific that we can get to this level of agreement and actually draw in the specific plan, those entitlements that creates these scenarios. But as Councilman Englander was saying, it requires the council member in concert with the stakeholders, in cooperation with the mayor's office, to get to this level of maturity, if you will, in defining and redefining land use patterns. But
if I may, Ken Bernstein, just something point to add. We have a number of both process and policy innovations in this plan, and I think we are drawing from the best lessons of the CASP on a number of our planning efforts. Very soon we'll be bringing you the new Warner Center plan, the Warner Center 2035 plan in the West Valley, which has a number of similarities in terms of both process and some of the same policy innovations in terms of transit-oriented development in that community. And we are also undertaking a number of our transit neighborhood plans, our transit-oriented development plans around new transit stations. We have 10 of those underway currently along the Expo and Crenshaw corridors. We have an application to Metro in for another 12 stations, where our hope is that we will be drawing on many of these lessons, whether it's the policy innovations in terms of sustainability, walkability, parking policy, as well as some of the administrative clearance and process streamlining that we've seen on the CASP, and making that, we don't have a one-size-fits-all, and we may not go quite as far as we did in the CASP in every area, and we'll be sensitive to community concerns, but drawing on the best practices of this plan in many of those plans going forward.
Thank you. Okay, Claire?
Before you go to input from the community, I did want to just make you aware there's a couple of amendments that we have circulated, primarily to pages 27 and 29. You have copies of just clarifying some language in reference to the trust fund we're establishing for the transfer of floor area program. And on pages 62 and 63, given the council's recent adoption of the bicycle parking ordinance, we felt that it would make more sense for us actually to remove some of the parking requirements in this plan and link them to that ordinance. We think that ordinance was really very well crafted and in some ways went further than this plan actually had done in terms of the bicycle parking requirements, especially in terms of its discussion about low, long-term and short-term parking. And so we have made those modifications.
Okay. Well, thank you again, and appreciate all your hard work. We do have with us Ceci Trin. Like to come on up. And I want to thank Ms. Trin for her patience. She's been in the trenches with us through a good part of this process, and I appreciate all your input, but you're on the floor.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Ceci Trin. I'm from the Southeast Asian Community Alliance, and we are a local community group that is directly impacted by the CAS plan. And I think that Councilmember Reyes has alluded to the long and extensive process of this plan. I mean, you know, I want to acknowledge the staff and Jill for like all the work that's been put in, and just recognizing that this is an incredibly ambitious plan in its breadth and its scope. But then also the remarkable thing for me is this is probably the first plan that I've ever seen that has the support of environmentalists, transportation advocates, affordable housing advocates, and the business community. Like, when does that happen, right? And Councilmember Reyes, you know like how much discussion and arguments were happening a year ago, and now for all of us to be on the same page. And so, you know, I would just ask that Plum adopt the recommendations that were put forth by the Planning Department and the Planning Commission in regards to the 1.5 FAR, and only ask for one change, which is to change the early adopter period for the density bonus from 5 to 3 years. Thank you.
Okay. And a lot of that magic, I think, is because of Jill's stamina and tenacity in making this happen, along with the rest of the staff and Claire, because I know you guys been through a lot. Remy de la Pesa. Remy, come on up. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. Remy de la Pesa, staff attorney with Public Counsel Law Center. We've represented the Southeast Asian Community Alliance for the last couple years and their engagement on this plan. And I really am here just to echo kind of what Ceci has already stated and what Councilmember Reyes has stated, that we really appreciate the work that not only the Department of City Planning, that your office, but also the work the Planning Commission spent a number of hearings and work groups really investigating some of the provisions, especially around affordable housing intensively. So really to thank everybody involved for making this a meaningful process. And again, we are in support of the recommendations that are coming forth from Planning Commission and the Department. Specifically to keep the base FAR in residential in the urban village at 1.5, and also I believe the language is still in the works, but there is going to be an opportunity for developers to provide the affordable housing off-site under the bonus FAR program, and we really want to make sure that there's enough language governing the timing of that development compared to the market rate developments that are going to be happening, making sure that that affordable housing happens at the same time, if not earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Marcos Velayos. A familiar face.
Good afternoon, Councilman Reyes. Marcos Velayos with Park and Velayos, representing the Ribbley family wine estates. The Ribbley family has been in this community for over 95 years, and they own properties both within and outside of the CASP in this area, and we just wanted.
And that's in the commercial too, right?
And Santo Ribbley, who's the face of the Bank of America commercial, he's
Okay.
here today.
Right.
And Steve Ribbley, who's been very intimately involved in the process as well as is in Italy. But I know he also wanted us to be here today just to thank you and your office and Joe Sorio, as well as Claire Bowen and the Planning Department for all of their hard work and efforts in this plan. It's really been an impressive effort, and despite the length of the process and all of the issues, we're really grateful for your leadership and your office taking the time, especially over the holidays and over the last couple of months, of really understanding and working through all of the challenging issues and all of the different groups, and making sure that the plan really would execute its vision and really took into account all of the different groups and interests. So thank you very much for your leadership on this issue, and we're in support of this item moving forward.
Great, and I also thank you for your patience, the Ribbley family, the contribution and their creation of jobs and tourism and all the good things that happen there. So that being said, there's no more cards on this item. I think we're ready for the directives. And we'll start with the following, and that is to adopt the recommendations in the January 9th, 2013 Planning Commission report. 2, to instruct the Department of City Planning to remove 129 through 169 West Avenue 34 and 3401 through 3433 Pasadena Avenue, Los Angeles 931 from the plan by request of the property owner. 3, instruct the Department of City Planning to report back to Plum on recommendations for creating an ongoing stakeholder group within the CASP. 4, instruct Department of City Planning and Department of Transportation to report back to Plum on best practices to encourage shared parking in the CASP. 5, instruct Department of City Planning to report back to Plum on an allocation plan for the trust fund that will be established for the Transfer Floria Ratio Program, the TFAR program. 6, instruct Department of City Planning with the assistance of the Housing Department to report back to CPC in 4 years with a status update on the number of affordable units that have been generated in order to determine whether the density bonus formula should automatically change or whether new recommendations should be made. 7, instruct the Department of City Planning to report back to the Planning Commission in 4 years on an update on the Transfer Floria Ratio TFAR program to date. 8, instruct Department of City Planning and Department of Transportation to report back to the City Planning Commission in 4 years on an analysis of the parking for the area. And 9, request the city attorney to prepare the ordinance. So that will be the set of instructions for that particular item, item 7. And again, I'm sounding a little facetious, but I think those horns would have been really nice right now. But anyway, I again thank the staff for their hard work, the stakeholders, and I'm looking forward to seeing this in the council. Councilmember?
I enthusiastically cast my vote.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I am very much appreciative. Okay, so that'd be the action of this committee. Thank you very much. Next item, Roberto.
Next item, council members, is item 8. It's an appeal by Mike Hakim, Colony Holdings. The representative is Nicole Smith. It has to do with a disapproval of a general plan amendment and also disapproval of zone changes for a mixed-use project in CD 10.
Okay.
Good afternoon, honorable council members. I'm Linda Smith, LA City Planning Department, hearing officer assigned to this particular case. This appeal is basically in response to the City Planning Commission's October 8th, 2009 action. The Commission's action at that time was a denial of a general plan amendment, a zone and height district change, also a conditional use, various yard adjustments, and site plan review for a property located as indicated at 805 South Catalina Street. The City Planning Commission also at that time did not adopt the associated environmental clearance. The Commission found that the requested general plan amendment from neighborhood commercial and high medium density residential to regional commercial did not comply with the charter, in that the requested amendment, general plan amendment, I'm sorry, does not reflect the land use patterns, trends, or uses in the immediate area, and therefore does not further the intent, purposes, and objectives of the Wilshire Community Plan. I'd just like to briefly or in general respond to the main elements in the appeal. The project, as it was initially proposed, was the demolition of approximately 68 dwelling units, a small portion of commercial square footage, and some parking uses, and the construction of a 35-story mixed-use development with 270 dwelling units and about 3,600 square feet of commercial space. The subject site is approximately 56,000 square feet. It is a through lot that's located just south of 8th Avenue. Therefore, it does not have any frontage on 8th Street. The primary frontages are on Catalina and on Kenmore. The surrounding area basically is comprised of multiple family developments that range in height from 1 to 6 stories, and various neighborhood commercial uses that also range in height from about 1 to 3 stories. The only high-rise development in the immediate area is to the north along Wilshire Boulevard. The Wilshire corridor along that portion is designated as regional commercial, and does allow for the R5 density, but that is much to the north of this particular site. If retained, the existing general plan land use designation of medium density residential and neighborhood commercial is far more consistent and compatible with the existing pattern of development in the area. If the general plan amendment and zone change were approved, keep in mind that it would have allowed a 35-story structure with over 270 parking dwelling units to be built in that particular area. It was indicated in the findings by the City Planning Commission that that level of density and that type of project would be far better suited to the north along Wilshire Boulevard. That is basically my conclusion and response to the appeal, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
Yeah, let's see. Let's do this. But just to be clear, it's been to commission how many times?
It actually went to the commission at least 2 times, perhaps 3 times before it there was an action on it.
Okay, well, let's hear from the public comment cards, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
Mr. Westall, there are 2 other cards. Would you like to speak first or last? Okay. So Rob Catherman and Lee Julie Oaks. Mr. Catherman. Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, committee members. Rob Catherman with Catherman Company representing Colony Holdings. We have some architectural drawings representing the project. These were submitted to the committee. About 6 weeks ago. Before I go through the project, though, I noted on the agenda today that it said this item has been continued from January, December, October, and prior meetings. So I want to thank the committee for your patience in dealing with this project. Originally, this project was, as staff indicated, denied by the Planning Commission back in August of 2009. And this project was originally designed during the height of the 2005-2006 economic era in real estate. Since then, we've been dealing with a new reality, as the committee knows. The project has been downsized from the 35 to 25 stories, as this plan indicates, and we have an extremely attractive rendering that shows what the project is going to look like. There are a number of factors, and I don't want to go through all of it today, that we've submitted in our findings, but basically you have a site that's adjacent to the Wilshire corridor. You have an area that has older, poor quality housing. This site, I think, will set an example for what this community can be in the future, not what it is today. The site is only 12 minutes from downtown by public transportation. You have a tremendous employment core along the area. You have the Kennedy Community School across the street. So I think there's a lot of factors that weigh in favor to mitigate this project zoning and general plan designation. I'd like to invite Lee Oakes up here if the committee would like.
Please, they did fill a card out. You have Lee and Julie Oakes?
Yes.
Okay, come on up.
Terry Kaufman, Messiah City Attorney's Office. So I just want to clarify for the record that the project in front of you today is the one that's on the agenda. And I think the gentleman is talking about either a modification or something that is being proposed. So the committee, if the committee wants to hear just a very little bit about that to give its direction, but that project is not in front of you today.
Right, it has not properly been publicly noticed. So, thank you.
I am the Lee of Lee and Julie Oakes. Actually, it's an architectural company. We're the architects for this project. We were not the architects for the original building that was presented. So, I'm not aware of all of the issues that were presented at that particular time. We, as an architectural company, have been in town for 25 years now and have done significant projects. The Helms Bakery redo is one of our primary projects. This particular location, we looked at the 35-story building and felt like it was out of scale with the entire situation. We did look at what was happening right now, what's happening in the future along the Wilshire corridor, and felt like that the adjacency could be appropriate if the economics of the situation are appropriate, and felt that we could design a building in this location that would be a significant addition to the adjacent areas of the corridor.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Westall.
Good afternoon, members. Andrew Westall, excuse me, Assistant Chief Deputy for Council President Herb Wesson. This is a project, as you can tell from the time on it, that we've been working on for a very long time, and did have a lot of issues with it when it was first proposed, and that's why we chose not to comment publicly at the CPC hearing when it was heard in 2009. We've been working with the applicant over several years trying to come up with a project that not only best fit the site, but in our opinion also dealt with some of the issues with the original project, the major one being the shadowing onto the school site to the north. At this time, we are supportive of a modified project that is, as described by the appellant, much smaller project, although similar in nature in some ways. And we would ask for a couple of things. We would ask some time for the planning department to flesh out this new project and that this item be continued for 90 days. We would also ask that the applicant be directed to flesh out the new design and to submit proposed conditions and findings to the planning department within a couple of weeks so that the department can have some time to review that. And then furthermore, we would like the applicant to work with the planning department's case management unit so that we can get through and see if this new modified project is feasible and works within the envelope of the originally proposed project. And so those are the conditions or the requests that we have today.
And I think your very last point is probably the most pivotal points, in that the modifications can fit within the original parameters of initial application. So that's going to be, I think, the test or the challenge.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, we only have so much expertise in-house, and so we really like the department to take a real close look at this.
Okay. Madam City Attorney, anything else?
It looks like the time to act on this is going to expire before everybody comes back, so the applicant should request in writing a continuance and with the concurrence of the committee.
Okay, so we can get a letter from the applicant, because we're gonna miss the window with this continuance to April 30th. The window closes, so we need your support and approval to move it to a wider range of time.
Yeah, we certainly agree to that, and we'll submit that to the committee in writing tomorrow morning.
Okay. Okay. So this will be continued to April 30th with the request as stated by the council office, and we'll stay tuned. Thank you, sir. All right, so that concludes that item. Rebecca, anything else on the agenda?
No, public comment.
Public comment. Anybody here for public comment? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.